Marcus Webb was 24 years old the first time he stood at the base of Mount Adler. He had driven up from Denver the night before and slept in his car in the trailhead parking lot, the way people do when they cannot afford a lodge and will not admit it. He ate a gas station breakfast and watched the other 5 members of the team arrive in better gear than his, in vehicles newer than his, carrying the easy confidence of people who had done this kind of thing before. Marcus had never been above 12,000 feet in his life. He had been added to the team 3 weeks earlier as a last-minute replacement for a climber who had broken his wrist in a training fall. The team leader, a man named Carter Reed, had been looking for someone with endurance and a willingness to follow instructions precisely. A mutual contact had given him Marcus's name. Marcus had said yes before he fully understood what he was saying yes to. He said he thought about backing out twice in the 2 weeks before the climb. He did not back out. He's not sure whether that was courage or something less admirable. Carter Reed had summited in the Himalayas twice. Diane Frost had climbed Denali solo in winter with a torn rotator cuff she had not told her doctor about. The other 3 members had between them decades of high-altitude climbing experience and a collective composure that Marcus described later as the most intimidating thing about the entire expedition. They were not reckless. They were not arrogant. They were simply people for whom a mountain of this size was a known quantity. Marcus was the only person on that team for whom it was not. They set out on the morning of March 8th, 2019. The first day went without incident. The weather held. The pace was steady. Carter set the rhythm, and the rest of them followed it, moving in the particular silence that high-altitude climbing produces, a silence that is partly concentration and partly the thin air that makes unnecessary conversation feel like an extravagance. Marcus said the first day was the best he had felt in years. He said there was something about the scale of the mountain that made every other problem in his life feel temporarily weightless. He said he understood. That first day, why people did this. The storm came in on the morning of the second day. The forecast had given them a window. The window closed faster than anyone had predicted. By 8 in the morning, at just over 15,000 feet, the wind had reached speeds that made forward progress not just difficult, but dangerous. Carter made the call to descend. There was no argument. This is what experienced climbers do. They read the mountain, and they listen to what it tells them, and they go down. They roped together in pairs, and they started moving. Marcus was at the rear of the group. He was paired with a climber named Joel Strand, who was directly in front of him on the rope. They had been descending for roughly 20 minutes when the visibility dropped to near zero. The wind was producing a sound that Marcus described as not like wind at all, more like a pressure, a physical force that came from everywhere at once, with no clear direction. He kept his eyes on the back of Joel's jacket. Then Joel's jacket disappeared. The rope between them went slack. Marcus called out. He received no answer. He called out again, louder, and the wind returned his voice to him immediately, as if it had no interest in carrying it anywhere. He moved carefully to where Joel had been and found nothing. He called for Carter. He called for Diane. He called all 5 of their names in sequence, standing still at 15,000 feet in a whiteout, waiting for any response. None came. What followed was something Marcus has described many times and says he still does not fully understand himself. He did not panic. He said this not as a point of pride, but as a genuine observation about his own behavior that he cannot entirely explain. He assessed his position. He assessed his equipment. He identified a narrow rock shelf, approximately 15 meters below him, and made his way to it carefully, using his ice axe and moving one point of contact at a time the way Carter had drilled them. He reached the shelf. He deployed his emergency bivouac, a lightweight foil and fabric shelter designed for exactly this situation. He crawled inside. He pulled the opening closed behind him. He stayed there for 31 hours. Temperatures outside dropped to negative 22 degrees Fahrenheit. Marcus had emergency rations for 24 hours, which he rationed across 31. He had a small chemical heat pack that lasted 8 hours. He had a headlamp, a spare battery, a whistle, and a personal locator beacon that he activated immediately and that he later learned had been transmitting his position the entire time. He did not know this, while he was inside the shelter. He did not know if anyone was looking. He did not know if anyone was left to look. He told us he did not pray. He said he was not sure whether that was a reflection of his beliefs or simply the fact that his mind would not organize itself into that shape. He thought about his mother. He thought about the drive from Denver and the gas station and the parking lot. He thought about the other 5 members of the team and made himself stop thinking about them because he had identified with a clarity that surprised him that thinking about them was not something he could afford to do inside that shelter and still function. He said the hardest part of those 31 hours was not the cold. He had the shelter and the heat pack, and he managed the cold as a practical problem. The hardest part was the sound of the mountain in the dark, the wind, the creak and shift of ice and rock around him. He said the mountain was completely indifferent to whether he was alive or dead, and that he had never felt that kind of indifference before, and that it had a texture to it he was not prepared for. The rescue team reached him at 3:14 a.m. on March 10th. He heard the helicopter before he heard the voices. He opened the shelter, and the cold came in all at once, and he said his first clear thought was that the light on the rescue team's helmets was the most extraordinary thing he had ever seen. He was calm when they reached him. The rescue team noted this in their report. He was cooperative, oriented, and calm. He had 2 broken ribs he had not known about. Frostbite on the first 2 fingers of his left hand and the small finger of his right. A concussion from a fall he did not remember taking. He was airlifted to a hospital in Denver. He was treated and discharged after 4 days. Carter Reed and Joel Strand were recovered the following day. Diane Frost and the remaining 2 team members were recovered on the day after that. Marcus was the only one who came home under his own power. He was 24 years old. He went back to his apartment. He went back to his job at a logistics company where he processed freight invoices 8 hours a day. He did not tell most of his coworkers what had happened. The ones he told asked questions he did not know how to answer. He began seeing a therapist 6 weeks after the accident, not because he had decided to, but because his mother had made the appointment and driven him there herself. He said the first session was the first time he had said the names of the other 5 climbers out loud since the mountain. He said it was harder than he expected. He said he expected it to be very hard. Survivor's guilt, his therapist told him, was a completely normal response to an abnormal event. Marcus said that was the most useless thing anyone had ever said to him. He said he did not mean it as a criticism. He understood what the therapist meant and why it needed to be said. But normal and useless are not mutually exclusive, and being told that your pain is normal does not make the pain behave normally. He stopped sleeping past 3 in the morning. He stopped being able to sit in rooms with more than a few people without counting them, without running a quiet inventory of exits and weather and risk. He said this was not dramatic. He said it was simply what his mind had decided to do with itself after the mountain, and that he had spent a significant amount of time and effort in the years since trying to persuade it to do something else instead. 3 years after the accident, in the spring of 2022, Marcus drove back to Colorado. He parked in the same trailhead parking lot where he had slept in his car before the climb. He stood at the base of Mount Adler for 4 hours. He told us he did not go up. He had not intended to go up. He needed to look at it in daylight from the ground and remind himself that it was a mountain, that it had no intention, that it had not chosen to take 5 people and return 1, that it was simply a geological formation at a specific elevation, and that it did not know his name, and had never known his name and would not know it if he returned. He said it did not help. He said the mountain looked exactly the same as it always had. He said he is going back again this spring. Marcus Webb volunteers, now with a nonprofit organization focused on mountain safety and high-altitude climbing preparedness. He gives talks to climbing groups about equipment, weather assessment, and the decision to turn back. He is direct and practical and specific, and people find him exceptionally useful to listen to. He does not tell them about the 31 hours in the shelter unless they ask. Most of them ask. He does not tell them he wished he hadn't come down. He said he doesn't think it would help them. He said that particular piece of information belongs to him. And the mountain, and the specific 3 years it took him to get from the parking lot back to something that resembled his life. He said he is still getting there. He said most days that feels like enough. He still has the emergency bivouac. He keeps it in the original stuff sack in the bottom of his closet. He has never opened it again. He said he is not sure he ever will. He said he is also not sure you'll ever throw it away. He said, I came down. Some days I understand why. Some days I'm still working on it. I think that's probably how it goes.